Hey everybody, welcome to, I guess, a sort of a surprise unannounced bonus episode of the podcast. Today we are celebrating 8 years of the show, which is a little crazy to me. I don't know where the time's gone. I'm joined today, as you may have heard from that, by Eden. How's it going?
Oh, yes, I am here. I'm also kind of like, it's one of those, I've said it a few times recently for various reasons, of time both flies and drags.
Yeah.
8 years feels like it was yesterday, and at the same time, it feels like it's a long time ago. So yeah, it's funny to think we've been going this long, and I'm sure that we've got some people listening that have been with us for the most part.
So I think so,
just sticking with us, and hopefully we've got some other newer folks listening.
Yeah.
Who knows? Speak to us. Let us know.
Let us know. Shout out the comment. Like, share the episode. Share it to new people. Get them to hear it and everything.
We're gonna try.
Starting with a shameless plug.
Hit that like and subscribe button. Yada yada yada.
Smash that like button.
It almost came out of my mouth and was like, no, I can't go that far.
Yeah. But I think that we should say what the plan today is that we are, I mean, you may have figured out from the title of this episode, we're going to spoil everything. In that we're basically going to look back on 8 years of, looking back on 8 years of stories. In trailer voice. Full disclosure, I've been awake for 45 minutes, so if I sound a little bit out of it, that's why. But we're going to go back through all of our previous storylines. We're going to give a little bit of insight into each of them. I would say up the top here, if you haven't listened to something that we've done and you want to listen to it and not be spoiled, this probably isn't the episode for you to be listening to right now. Go back and listen to it and then come back here and hear our insights on it. But we're going to be going right back to the beginning. Right to episode 1 when we played D&D, and just sort of talk our way through everything that's happened. I think we're probably going to have more thoughts on certain stories than others, I think. And definitely we've probably said some of the stuff before as well as the other thing. But, but look, it's been 8 years. Yeah. The other thing I want to say as well is obviously we are, we've been on a sort of hiatus for a little bit. We are still mid-season on Frontier Season 2. I just want to reassure you all that we are coming back. We are going to be coming back with the back half of the season at some point. I think in way of a vague explanation is that it's been a busy year, and stress and real life stuff has kind of gotten in the way a few times, and it got to the point where I was like, you know what, let's just focus on recording. I'll get, we'll be back with new episodes when we're back with them. But we have been recording, haven't we? We've gotten, I think, 4 more recording sessions of Frontier booked. So whether that sometimes doesn't correspond to 4 episodes, that sometimes would be more episodes. So there is more Frontier coming. We've definitely been playing, we've been recording. It's been a fun time. But we'll be back very soon with that. So watch this space. We're not going nowhere, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't think I won't go into more depth than that in terms of like where we've been and things like that. But let's we'll call that a watch this space moment, I think. But definitely I think I don't want to put a date on it. I was about to say I think at this point, but I think in the next little bit. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else we wanted to sort of say up top here. Really, we've kind of given the spoiler warning and the update.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Let's dive right into the spoiler. What are we calling it? The 8th anniversary spoilerific recap episode. So let's get right back then to the first storyline. With we were kicked off on our first episode went live. We recorded it a week, or I think it really was only a week before. May 24th, 2017. If it actually may have only been a couple of days before, now I think about it. But May 24th, 2017 was our first episode. I think we actually just did 2 recording sessions, didn't we, for that first storyline?
I think so. My memory is increasingly hazy that far back.
Yeah.
But yes, I remember it was me, you. Well, you'd gotten things organised. I was the willing party that knew a bunch about games. Mark was the one that knew nothing about games in particular, but was happy to join us. And Jason was also he knew what he was doing to a great extent. So we had an interesting kind of dynamic going there.
Yeah, I mean, my whole thought when putting the group together for that first one was more that you all had done podcasts with me before and were happy to talk on microphones and were open to like fantasy games and things, mostly video games, really. But before, but like I was like confident that you'd get the gist of it and not like sit there quietly was the main thing, you know. But yeah, it was a really janky setup where I think I had one mic and we had one other mic pointed at the three of you sat on a sofa together. And I think we recorded, we did 6 episodes spread across 2 game sessions. And it was, I say, a bit of a janky setup. And it was like me deciding I was going to do sound effects and everything like that. And I think that actually very quickly came in after this first storyline, didn't it?
Yes, yeah. You can, listening back to that early one, you can hear distinctly like the sound quality difference and the lack of ambience, which is something that you definitely added in not too long afterwards, but I think brings a lot to the actual production. Hopefully gets people into the mindset of what's going on a little bit more. But as you say, it was chaotic. We were doing it to see if it would work, and I think arguably it did. So we kept going.
Yeah, the first. I mean, I'm happy with the storyline we did. It's just that it still sounds a little bit experimental in terms of like audio quality and things like that. But I think that's pretty much true of any, you know. I mean, we're an indie podcast, you know, we're not, we haven't got production budget or anything really. I mean, you know, as happy as I am with how we sound these days, with, you know, all the music and sound effects and everything, that's very much me like pulling the podcast up by my bootstraps, I guess, and just being like, no, I'm going to write all the music and not sleep and things like that and whatnot. But yeah, that early one, I like the story, but let's break it down. So we meet our wayward heroes, Prance, Bork, and Enave, who are traveling on a. They've hitched a ride with a dwarf guy whose name I forget right now, who runs the local inn in the small town of Eravale. And along the way, very quickly actually, because the mic's cut out for a little bit, so we lost a little bit of the recording. They find themselves running to the aid of some villagers who are being attacked by goblins. In fact, I think this is the only episode still that has a little bit of a time jump in it because the mic's cut out. That was the other thing as well. My PC was having trouble in that first couple of recordings, wasn't it? With, I don't know, it was like a memory thing or something or other, but it would like, if I ran Photoshop at the same time, which is how we were doing battle maps, it would occasionally like not record, like it would keep recording, but then would just like lose some of it. It didn't make any sense to me. I've got essentially a new PC now, really, since those days. I mean, this is 8 years ago. We never have any problems anymore. But that was so we actually lost a good 10-15 minutes of the recording, I think, because it sort of jumps from you guys in the cart to like being in combat, which is it's always a little bit of like, oh god, it would have to happen in the first episode, wouldn't it? You know, it was a sort of bad introduction. And I do wonder over the years, like how many people have been put off by listening to that, hearing tech problems and slightly janky audio and no ambience and sound effects, even after like nowadays they introduce us as like, with complete soundscapes and music and everything, and they listen to episode 1 and go, well, that was a lie, you know.
It's the difficulty with having gone on so long. It's sort of like, I think that obviously we're not talking to people right now that are like new listeners, presumably. But it's one of those where like pointing people towards the later stuff is probably the way that we want to do it these days. And I know I certainly have like a little bit further down the road where we've got things more cemented, and then you can kind of go backwards and be like, let's hear the proto version of this. And I do that sometimes with the things I'm a fan of. So I would have hoped that there's a handful of people that might have done that and that they would understand that, hey, we're not like professional like artists or anything. We don't get paid for doing this. So it's one of those of like, I think it comes together nicely with that in mind. I
do try and point like these days when I introduce people, I do say like, I try and sort of say like, look, my favorite thing that we've done is the thing we're doing at the moment, which is Frontier, and like it also happens to be, I think, the best sounding bit of it. So check that out if you like it. Go back and check out the other stuff. And of course, right from the beginning, the idea was we were going to have like rotating cast and like be playing various games and such. So like there was always kind of a jumping on point for new people. So I think that has kind of worked really. Yeah, so let me go back to this episode descriptions here. I have our own website open to remind myself what happened every time.
I've got the same thing in front of me. There's no way I'm remembering the order of events or anything like that.
Also, I was a little too cryptic, I think, in my descriptions here, because that doesn't tell me anything. Looking at episode 1 there. I think we actually cut the first episode in the middle of the combat here, because based on the description of episode 2, our adventurers, Prance, Emily, and Bork continue their encounter with some goblins. I
think we'd gotten. I mean, everything was a bit chaotic in that fight, but I think I'd started setting fire to things.
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this was kind of like, I think we very early on got the vibe here of what things were going to be like, because chaos reigned very much from the beginning, and I was like, I wondered sort of what was, are people going to be a little bit like by the book or whatever? And very early on, you were like, I am taking a child's toy, I'm setting fire to the building, I'm doing this, and that was very much set the mood of like, okay, this is
reined in my chaotic tendencies.
Yeah,
in more recent times, but it definitely started off in the, I don't know, let's aim for the bushes kind of a style, which, yeah.
No, I'm on board with it.
Like, definitely won, so that probably, I could get away with it with them.
Yeah, but like, I'm on board with that. Big swings. I'd rather them be like big swings that are a little bit silly than like, sitting quietly and not doing stuff. It's sort of, it's more fun. I don't know. I mean, maybe we ought to give like an overview of each of these story arcs as we go through them. And then we can break down sort of get into the nitty gritty, really.
Mm-hmm.
That might be the best way, because we do have quite a lot to get through.
Indeed, yeah. I think we give the broad overview of things rather than getting into the episode by episode. That's probably the better way.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so this first kind of, I've called it in our story arc directory season 1, but it's kind of just the first story arc. Called Children of Eravale. Basically the storyline, which I'd run previously about a year and a half before this, when I was still had like a regular D&D group. I say that like it's a pre-written module, but it was just like, it was a story that I had done previously and was like, oh, maybe I'll just do that bit again, and then I wrote it up when we were going to do the podcast, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Essentially, our heroes make it to this village, and they find out that some children have gone missing. Obviously, we've talked about that a house was being attacked by goblins on the outskirts as they arrive, and the implication there that they come to find out is that they think the goblins have been taking children away from the village, and that there's a couple missing, and two of the missing ones are sort of were like orphans, so there hasn't really been a big inquest into it, but one of them is the son of a local man who they go and visit. He gives them a little bit of information. He's clearly distraught and everything, and I think in general get sort of pointed towards where the goblins are hiding out, really, which is in the woods, sort of some distance away. But I think I'm trying to keep this straight in my head, because it was 8 years ago, and I definitely don't have my notes to hand for it. You went and checked out there's like a windmill where you thought that the I'm trying to remember if this like you'd gotten this information from somewhere, or whether you just stumbled across it, actually, that the windmill was I
couldn't tell you.
Yeah. Either way, you went to a windmill thinking that there would be information there, and you found that maybe it had been a place where like a meeting had taken place. So I'm wondering whether you'd gotten that information from one of the goblins in the battle.
Mm-hmm.
This is me trying to put it together after the fact of like, I know they went to the windmill because there was another clue there that they found later on. I'm
trying to dredge this from the depths of my mind. But, too many things have passed since then. Too many stories.
Maybe
too many things pushes old information out.
You know what? Maybe you didn't go to the windmill straight away, because I know you went into the woods to look for the goblins, fought the goblins in the dark. It was a lot of fun. And like basically killed your way through this whole little kind of goblin band, and all that was left was like the leader, who was like a hobgoblin. He was a little bit like smarter and was like, look, well, no, you've killed all my people, just let me go, and I'll leave the area. And I think you questioned him about like, so what's the deal, where are these children, because there weren't any there. And he was like, look, we were just hired to take them, we weren't going to keep them, we'd pass them on to our contact. And I think at this point you were suspecting the like local like sheriff, mainly based on the fact he was kind of a dick to you, but without any other evidence. That rings a bell.
He'd acted in such a way that made us want to follow him around.
Yeah, I think the actual following around happened in the second arc, but at that point, or maybe I'm wrong, maybe it was in the middle of this one. I know there was some following that went on, but either way, you basically thought he was kind of a dick, so that's why you thought he was the one behind it. The goblin just was like, look, all you humans look the same. I was just hired to it, and I've got my gold. I'm pissing off. So you let him leave. You let him live. But he told you that the handoff was at the windmill, if I remember right. So then went back to the windmill, looked for evidence. The only thing you could find there was a particular growth of rare flowers, which you had seen in one other place in the village, which was in the house of the guy whose son was missing. Went there, broke in while he was asleep, and found in the basement his son's body, which looked like it had been killed. His son looked like he had died accidentally. And in cages there was one of the missing children, and evidence that he'd tried to siphon the life force from another one into his deceased son and failed, because he wasn't really a wizard. He was working from a book that he'd gotten, and you rescued the remaining living child and confronted him, and he just like had like a breakdown, and you took him to the cops, and and you solved my dead children mystery. Like that's not what I mean, but
yes, we did the right thing in spite of the chaotic nature of our group.
Yeah, like surprising restraint actually in like not killing the hobgoblin and letting him go, because he like gave the information, was like, look, I'm just gonna go. You know, you could have straight up murdered him. I think that maybe you were low on spell slots and health yourselves at that point, possibly, but at the same time, you know, restraint was held, and then also for not murdering this guy. So yeah, that was a job well done. I think it was kind of a little first adventure thing, and again, it was a little bit stumbling, a little bit kind of finding our feet, but I like it as a sort of story, and we got to kind of get to know our characters a little bit. Sort of, you know, a little bit of a look inside, like what drove them and everything. Obviously, that we'd go on and do more from that afterwards, but I don't know. I kind of look back on that as like, if only the production value was what it is now, that would have been like a real. Like, I still think it was a pretty great start to the show, but like, I think it just let down by the production.
That's it. It is a notable difference, but again, I would hope that audience members have got it in them to recognise that that's just the nature of the game. That like, things improve over time, and in particular, like I feel like the whole podcasting thing, like we've been going for a long, long while. Like listening to other people's work and that kind of stuff, like I feel like it still stands out pretty well. Hopefully, others think the same. Not to blow our own trumpet too hard.
Yeah, I don't want to pat ourselves on the back too hard, but I'm pretty pleased with it. So we rolled straight from there into the second story arc. Same character, same setting. At this point, this is where I say we rolled straight in. This is how full of ourselves we were. I did a Q&A episode as episode 7. I was like, talk to us about our thing. And like, I think I was just happy to be doing it, you know. Yeah. And I was like, let's talk about.
It was much to try and gauge reaction at that point.
Yeah.
If anything else, I think. Like my memory is that, like, I mean, it's not easy to gain like actual reaction from people a lot of the time, and we have got a handful of people that like fans of the show that are now friends, so to speak, and what have you, that like are positive. But for the most part, you release something and there's just the wind in the trees, and that's all you get in response. Maybe some thumbs up if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So you got to fish, and I get that.
Yeah, exactly. Look, this is not to guilt any current listeners at all. You know, if you do, if you're happy to just listen and not say anything, that's totally fine by us or whatever. Yeah. Of course, we would appreciate any comments or likes and interaction, but each to their own. We're not here to push anybody to do anything they don't want to do. But and we appreciate that you're there.
Yeah, nobody's going to bite a head off or anything like that, but it's whatever.
Yeah. So we roll straight into, like, I've got it written down here as season 2, but I think, again, calling it a season at this point is a little, it rings a little weird in my head. This was the point where I was like, right, okay, if we're doing it, we're doing it. Like, we've done one full storyline. I have the ability to add music and sound effects and things like this. So from this point on, it's literally from episode 8 almost, like, it's super early where I go like, right, let's all in kind of thing. While our recording techniques weren't great still, although maybe at this point I think we had actually upgraded from one mic pointed at you guys to everybody having their own mics. I think that was at this point.
Yes, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So there was a little bit of a jump in quality. We at this point then also had music, and we had the sound effects and stuff. And I've gotten better at that over the years, so it's still not, it's not fully up to where we are now. But like, this is where we get a little better on that front. This second storyline, I'll give the overview, then we can sort of, if anything jumps out. We have our first brush with the evil cult, the cult of the bleeding eye or something like that. Again, I haven't got my notes open. Where it's literally like a day or two later, you guys are still hanging out in the same village, and you hear word of like people breaking into the temple, and I think there was like. Oh, that was it, yeah. A guy had been arrested who was breaking into the temple, who was trying to steal, like, the town's, like, holy relics, which were, like, left over from a magic user who'd lived there during the Demon War, which is, I think, is the first time I introduced this as well, which is, like, I was starting to, like, flesh out my background lore of the world at this point and things. But the relics of Malar was a wizard, or I can't remember if it was a wizard or a sorcerer or something. Either way, his like staff and his like spell focus were kept in the temple here because he had like defended the village against demonic attack during the Demon War, and somebody had been arrested trying to break in and take them. So you went and talked to that guy in the cells, and he was like properly losing it, and he was sort of talking about how like he'd been told that he had like a certain amount of time to get these relics out of the temple, or he was going to be killed by magic. And you managed to get out of him that there was this cult that had kind of like kidnapped him and forced him to do this. And as you were talking to him, I think it was as you were talking to him, the this like magical sigil on his chest, like the time ran out basically, and it like flared up and like burnt a hole through his chest kind of thing. It's not strictly a D&D spell, but like this was like, I'm starting to lean into like, no, we're just telling a story here, and I'm going to invent some magic stuff if I need to, kind of thing, And there's room for inventing new spells in D&D.
Totally, yeah. You've got to have your homebrew.
Yeah. So I think you then all at that point kind of went, well, okay, they're probably going to come back to the temple and try and take it again. And so I remember you guys hiding out in the temple with a hunch that like, yeah, these guys will be back and then we'll get them. And you were right, but I think there was an awkward little bit of you all hiding behind pews and things like that stuff.
Yes, I remember Metal Gear Solid crawling underneath the pews at one point,
which was a bit of fun. And yeah, I mean, we had a battle in the temple, which again, I think I'd switched to. I thought we were still in the using Photoshop for battle maps section here, which very quickly moved away from towards me just like saying like, okay, here's a description of where you are, tell me what's going on, kind of thing, which has served us a little better. Obviously, we end up like discounting a little bit of the sort of more like in-depth like line of sight rules and stuff based on stuff when we do combat, but I feel like we don't do combat that often these days anyway. But yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
So
we don't often start the fights, so there's not often as much combat as perhaps other shows might have.
So if I remember rightly, you guys kind of failed in this battle, and the cult did get the relics. Am I right in thinking that?
I think they got away through the portal, if memory serves.
Yeah, because it was like there was like a few cultists came in. You took care of a couple of them, but one of them got to the relics, and like the spell focus had a built-in dimension door spell that could be used once a day or something, like for free. And like he got away with the stuff and ran off into the night. Because then you guys like were like, we need some horses, we'll get after him, and you left the town behind, promising to return the relics to the Mute. I mean, currently here we are in 2025, and you have not done that yet. But like,
well, there's a lot of reasons.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons for that, and that is that the last time we recorded with this group was like still 2018. So, like, that's totally fair, I think.
With one team member having had a kid and another having moved far away, it makes things a little bit more difficult for that one to get picked back up.
I mean, I was going to bring this up, but sort of when we got to the end of the next like little, the next arc, because to sort of be like, here's where we left off with that group. But yeah, it's kind of like I would like to come back to this group. I think it would be fun. However, it's like only gotten harder over the years, just in terms of like scheduling and like we don't all live in the same town anymore, and we're not all set up for like remote stuff, and yeah, I don't know. It would be maybe I'll buy Mike. This is the way to do it. I'll buy a mic for Mark and be like, plug this in, and we'll do it that way. But yeah, who knows? We're not going anywhere, I don't think.
See how we go.
Yeah. So then we actually got the first guest GM, which was Jason's first time GMing. Anything, I think, wasn't it? Here's his one shot.
Yep. I mean, he's well into it these days, but I'm pretty sure that was definitely his first go.
If anything, I think he plays more D&D than I do.
Yeah, he's on it constantly.
Yeah, check out End of Day Strife on YouTube for cool homebrew stuff and interviews and stuff. Yeah, it was sort of like, this was a fun little thing. I remember it. I had the idea of like starting with me doing narration, and then everybody goes to sleep, and then you don't really know it's a dream sequence. And it turned out the whole thing was like a dream, and it was like a weird kind of like odyssey through the woods, and there was, I don't know, like a druid who was smoking some stuff and things, and then at the end you all kind of come out of this dream, and we handed the narration back off to me, and I thought it was very cool to do it that way, like rather than like in the edit, literally on the day I was like, Jason finishes a sentence and then I pick up the narration from there, which I thought was fun. I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think this is where I kind of had it be that the dream was like brought on by like, there was like some creature, like you had taken shelter in like the ruins of like a tower, like you'd been chasing the cult guy, and it was like a storm, and you're like, oh, we should probably get under cover, and the ruins that you'd taken cover in were like the home of, I come up with a creature and called it the Dream Eater or something. I think I vaguely remember that. There's a file somewhere on my computer of that. And it just like gotten in your dreams. It was like, oh, let's make these a bit more vivid, and then I can get some energy out of these people. It wasn't like malicious or anything. But yeah, and then Jason showed early signs of NNA not having patience and shot at it and stuff. And it was like, what the hell are you people doing? So the next thing, I think I'm jumping over some stuff here because this is a longer story arc, and I can't remember everything that happened. the party then continue their pursuit, and they run into Vegan, who was a druid, who I invented purely to poke fun at Jason, who was newly vegan at that point, I think. And literally, that was a joke. I mean, I'm vegetarian as well, so I'm not like one of those like, oh, bloody vegans kind of thing, So I just thought it was funny. Vegan enlisted your help in, I think, rescuing his owlbear friend Feathers. And you were like, "Oh, an owlbear," because you'd heard of the owlbear toy and that you'd stolen from the little girl in the previous story arc. And then we met it, and it was like a full-size owlbear, and you're like, "Well, this thing's pretty big." And Feathers is like the size of a bear, I don't remember if anything came of that. Just that I was like, this should be like I just wanted it to be like a fun little combat to, introduce Vegan and his friend. Then. My memory is so hazy of this story arc. Actually, it really is. Like compared to the first one.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, my memory's made out of wet paper at the best of times. I can remember the broad strokes of what we did. But
specific moments popping out. Like I remember that. I remember Jason's thing. I remember like the bits that I kind of wrote music for, actually, probably because I listened to them over and over again. I would say at this stage, I mean, it was getting more in depth all the time. The amount of editing I was doing, especially in the first story arc, was minimal. Compared to now, where like I'm chopping at anything that's like, awkward, not even awkward silences, just like courteous silences, where we're, because we're all remote these days and we're not recording with cameras on. So we all give ourselves most of the time enough space to sort of speak and then pause and wait for the next person to start. But any time there's a pause, I had to, I'm cutting those out to make it sound a little bit more natural and everything. Whereas back in the day, I was just like, I think the first episode I had like 6 cuts in the whole thing. And now it's like hundreds and hundreds of cuts per episode. So yeah, I think at this stage in the second arc, I was still a little bit like, I'm leaving stuff in, and maybe that's why it ran a little bit longer. I think it was meant to be 6 episodes, and it ended up being 11 or 12. I still think it was fun, though.
Yeah.
So you finally caught up with the cult at a dig site, which is the tomb of Grazak the Dragon Slayer. Which was being excavated, it turned out, by a team from the university led by a professor from the university, who I meant to bring back in another one, and it just never happened. But he was meant to be like gnome Indiana Jones, basically. Was he a gnome or was he a halfling? Might have been a halfling. Either way, I can't remember his name, but it was that was my joke for myself. It's always jokes for me that like don't really land with anyone else, but I'm like, I'm glad I put that in. You fought the cult, you killed most of them. Another one of them used the dimension door thing again to kind of jump inside the tomb, if I remember rightly, and you were like, well, we'll catch up with him when we can get in there. You set free the archaeologist, and his there was a couple of members of his team were still there who were pretty badly beaten up and everything, and he even managed to open the door into the tomb and found that the guy who had dimension doored in had been immediately killed by a trap. So you recover the relics. I think they did a little bit of exploration in there, didn't set off any of my other traps if I remember right. I don't think you really did any more looting. I might be wrong in that.
I don't think we came out with pockets full of anything in particular. And yeah, I do remember being quite careful about that. There was a distinct, on my part at least, a determination to be like, I'm not having a character get killed so early on.
Yeah. I think there actually were some items in there that you could have gotten, if I remember right, but then you didn't because of that. I was like, there was a couple of traps that I think you saw and went, oh, not trying that, and I was like, okay, fair enough, and we just then didn't.
This is refreshing my memory. I think we might have come out with a little bit of equipment.
Possibly.
I think we found a weapon of some sort. we did the usual looting thing, and yeah, I do now vaguely remember that there was a little bit of equipment, maybe a belt and a spear or something like.
Oh, was there the lightning? Was that a lightning spear? Was that where that was from?
I think it might have been.
Yeah, that might have been it. It clearly wasn't a big plot point.
No, I do vaguely remember that there was some discussion about who should be getting what equipment after the fact.
Yeah, and that was then kind of the end of that storyline there.
Mm-hmm.
We will rejoin Bronze and then Ball, but I think I ought to mention the fact that this storyline was interrupted 2 episodes in by a one-shot adventure I did. It was the first time we played Star Trek Adventures, and I played it with the 3 guys from the Spotlight podcast, Liam, Paul, and Matt. And this was before Star Trek Adventures had even released. I had the pre-release PDF that had been because I pre-ordered the game. I didn't even have my rulebook yet. They hadn't printed it yet. So we were running off of like the pre-release PDF and the fact that I'd watched about 10, whatever had been released at that point, which is probably about 10 or 12 episodes of the Geek and Sundry series Shield of Tomorrow, where they were playing the game. They were like officially sort of tied in with Modiphius and everything, and like, or at the very least they had the rules even earlier than I had, kind of thing. And so I was sort of running off of like my memory of them, like story mechanics from an actual play that I'd been watching, and like a brief skim through of this PDF, which it's not not the best way to learn a game, I don't think.
No, I
had one afternoon, I had like a 3-hour window to record in. That was it. Like, because they were like, none of them are in town. Yeah, they don't live here and everything. It was maybe 3.5 hours, because I don't know what it ended up as. And I'd pre-built the characters with them on Skype calls before, back when Skype was the thing. I don't think we even had a Discord server at that point. I think we were like, no. So I'd done their characters over Skype with them, and we recorded our storyline, which was meant to be set kind of around the same time as Star Trek 3, Search for Spock. Which, I mean, it was a super basic kind of storyline, really. It was the crew of the USS Aristotle, I'm reading what I've got written here, must investigate a desperate call for help from a transport ship near the Klingon neutral zone, which I thought was going to be pretty straightforward. There's an abandoned ship. They need to find out where these prisoners have been taken, and they get attacked by a Klingon bird of prey, and they were going to go rescue the prisoners. And that's kind of what happened. However, in the middle, Liam decided to go rogue and decided his character thought that the captain was being a little bit too pro-Klingon in his thoughts and everything, saw an opportunity for advancement and mutinied, all on his own, with no one backing him up.
That was an interesting one, listening to that and just being like, is he doing what I think he's... he is actually going to go against the entire team? Interesting.
Yeah, it was an interesting move, and one that fully threw me off my game as I was DMing it. I was like, well, what are we doing? Oh no. I mean... big swings, like I said before, I love big swings, and it was fun, and we got some fun stuff out of it. And in the end of the day, like, essentially he kind of sat out the last little bit of it when they went and rescued the prisoners, which had to be severely shortened, I will say, because we spent a long time on the mutiny. Because again, like I say, I had them for one day, one afternoon, and I was like, well, we have to do the whole thing now. Like, this is, there's no like, we'll pick that up next time. It was like, no, this is it sort of thing. I'm still pleased with it. I still think it was fun. I wrote a bunch of music for it that I still reuse today, some of it. I think it was a fun story. I was speaking to actually today is Liam's birthday, but I've spoken to him a couple of times over the years, right? And I think the other thing is he didn't really get at the time sort of what these games were. He hadn't played any RPGs before, kind of thing. So I think he kind of took what I was saying about it being kind of collaborative storytelling rather than, which is true, and that, but he's sort of taken that part to heart rather than the you're working as a team sort of thing. So it kind of I think he'd seen an opportunity to kind of put in a plot twist and went with it, which is totally fine. It just caught me completely off guard, that's all. So what are you going to do? But no, interesting little thing, and like funny that like within the first 10 episodes, episode 10 was the character building one. So really, within the first sort of group of episodes of the podcast, we were already playing Star Trek. And we wouldn't come back to it till COVID, but yeah, I don't know. I kind of like that little story, even if it's super rough, super rushed as well, and it's fun. And I put a lot of work into the edit on that. That was like going from like, okay, we've done 2 episodes at that point of D&D with music to, right, okay, this is full Star Trek, all sound effects, all music, all everything, That was like the first full like jumping in with both feet kind of thing.
Making it more of an episode of something as opposed to just us recording something.
Yeah. Where did we go after that? We went from, we had those, we had the second D&D one. Now, we had our 2-part End of the World game after that.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember this. I quite like, I had stumbled across this RPG. I don't know whether I just stumbled on it on Amazon or whether I might have been like on the Something Awful forums, like RPG stories. They got something, but either way, it's an RPG that like you play as yourselves in various end of the world scenarios. We did the alien invasion one, and I really enjoyed this, but it didn't do that well at the time, I think, in terms of numbers. Basically, because it's a game that was immediately out of print. Nobody bought it. Nobody was interested in it. Nobody had heard of it, so nobody clicked on it. I think, which is it's a shame. But I kind of would like to play it again. To be honest, it was a lot of fun. I think.
No, that one's quite memorable because we were playing ourselves. So I do think that there was a little bit of local flavor to it, where not that we've got a huge number of people local listening, but like we were talking about areas around Bournemouth and Christchurch in particular. And describing like where we'd go and what we'd do. Like it was interesting because it did, and I'm not going to go too far down this line of thought considering the way the world is right now, but considering all of the apocalyptic scenarios and stuff and being like, what would we actually do? Where would we go? Was very interesting, to say the least.
I think the plan generally seemed to be like, one, you're getting over the back fence of my house, because we started it as like literally like the game started with us sitting down to do that recording. Which I thought was going to be fun.
Yeah, totally.
Immediately destroyed Mark's car by like an alien device thing falling from the. I didn't want to make it too easy.
You're not just driving out of town.
Yeah, I was like, come on, So you guys like hopped the back fence and like you kept trying to keep me alive, which is the thing. And I was like, let me kill me off. Like, I want to be. Let me just GM this. I don't want to also be running my guy.
I think we're all in the reality of it, where it's like, no man left behind.
Yeah,
we can't do this. We can't just let you die.
Yeah. So I think the initial plan was we were going to be like, we made it to the railway lines and like crept along the railway lines to near where Mark lived at the time with his girlfriend at the time to rescue her. They got attacked by an alien but managed to subdue it. But in the fight, I was killed. I was like, there we go, I'm dead now. And then the next plan was we were going to go again, kind of cutting across town to rescue Jason's, I guess now wife, but I can't remember if they were married at the time. They must have been. Yeah, but to Jason's place, yeah. And and it was just a 2-part kind of like fun little thing. I thought was like the game kind of grabbed me as like a play it yourself in the real world. What would you do, kind of thing, and was like. I wanted to shake things up from like we've been doing D&D for a while, other than the Star Trek thing, but you guys weren't involved in that. And I was like, let's do something completely different here. We're not in fantasy world, we're in like the real world, but sci-fi stuff's happening rather than fantasy stuff. And I don't know whether it'd be one to record again. Maybe it'd be just one to be like just play again at some point. But
I think amongst the broader group that we have now, I think we could get a fun game of that going in some way, shape, or form. In fact, thinking about it, that would be possibly something for a Dragon Meet. That's
like a con game.
Down, and then we can do it of like, well, we're at the con, and then something happens, and we'll play it the same way of just like, and what would we do if we left this place right now?
Yeah, exactly.
In the middle of London, I'd just be like, oh my god, I'm
Well, especially if I do like zombie
what I would
apocalypse
do,
or something. Yeah. Well, I've got the we did the alien invasion one. There was like a Rise of the Machines one. I can't remember which, because I bought 2 of the 4 books basically.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember which ones I got. I know obviously I got the alien invasion one. There was a zombie apocalypse one. There was a Rise of the Machines one. I think the final one, which I didn't get, was like basically like Rise of the Old Gods. So it's kind of like a Cthulhu thing. But the problem with the book is they weren't cheap. They were like full price, like 35 quid books. They were out of print even when I bought them. And so getting them now is going to be an impossibility. But there was a lot of like the same thing kind of thing, in both. Rather than they should have done one thick book really that had like all of the options for, hey, if you want to do a zombie apocalypse, here's some stuff, but just the rules in one place and a bunch of that. But instead they sold 4 books, the first half of which of each of them was basically the same, and then the back half of it was like, here's the particular flavor for this one. So here's the zombie stuff, or like here's the robot stuff. So it felt a little bit rip-off-ish, in terms of like I basically paid for the rules twice here.
Yeah, that's a bit of a shame.
Yeah, but I thought it was a fun game.
Totally, yeah. No, as I say, just the reality of it, the fact that it's like, I'm not actually having to really think that hard, because it's mostly just like, well, what would I do? Which perhaps at times might have been more revealing for certain moments. I don't know.
I need to re-listen to it. I think it was quite fun. But I mean, part of it was like, at the start was like building your characters. If I remember right, like we had to kind of build what we thought our stats would be. And then it was like, then you turn it over to the group and they can go like, well, no, you're clear, that's wrong. That's not what you're like, or whatever. Which I thought was a fun little kind of thing, which I think works best with a group like us where we'd known each other for a while. We knew each other well enough at that point to be able to like make fun of each other and be like, you're not like that, or whatever.
Exactly.
Whereas I think with a random con group, it wouldn't work so well, maybe, but like, unless you were playing it with like all friends and that.
Well, that's what I mean. Is like it wouldn't be for like random strangers. I'm mostly just thinking like we'd be in the same place as a bunch of folks we know from Penance and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
we could probably get something fun going on that basis.
I think so.
That's just a thought.
Maybe I'll bring it with me this year. See how we go. We're just making plans at this point. Not even talking about them. Okay, so we jumped straight basically from there. I was like, I think at that point I was like, well, I knew what I was doing next, and it was like, okay, well, here's a fun sort of cool down from D&D before I have a completely different group doing something else. I say completely because Mark was also involved. But we went straight from there to Star Wars, which was my first. I don't want to say first, no, because Star Trek I put a lot of work into the one shot with the Spotlight guys. But I think I really went all in on the amount of production work I put into the Star Wars one. This was the first time I was getting people to revoice NPCs, which we do a fair amount in Frontier now. Not all the time, but that we've got a few characters that I'm like, hey, when this character pops up, we get someone to revoice it. But yeah, Star Wars had a lot of that, which was a lot of fun. I got to get into sort of voice producer stuff, which I hadn't really done before, directing and things, which was a lot of fun for me. I ended up, I think it was almost for each of the episodes, I was basically working full time on them and then going to work in the evenings sort of thing. I mean, I've streamlined a lot of my processes now for doing things. I think it wouldn't be quite as much work as it was then, but like it was a lot of scripting, a lot of pre-writing, well, not even pre-writing, because we played the game and then I did this after the fact, I think. But yeah, it was a lot of work, but I'm really pleased with how it turned out. On listening back through, I listened back through the first episode of it a little while back because I was trying to explain the podcast to someone I work with, and they were like, "Oh yeah, throw on that," and I was like, "Oh, you probably like Star Wars thing." I think I still hadn't fully done what lent into how we do things now, which is to really minimize the amount of time we spend on dice rolling and rule discussion. So there is still a bit of that going on, and I think it's mainly in this one because at the time I was like, well, the version of the game we're playing, again, out of print at that point, and I felt like I needed to explain the rules because they weren't a game we had played before, and I thought, well, the listeners aren't going to know what we're doing. In hindsight, though, it kind of it grinds things to a halt a little bit, which is why later on, like these days, we keep all that to the minimum, basically, don't we? We just kind of do stuff and keep the story rolling.
There's the moments when it's sort of like, no, this is a real test of your character, but I think a lot of the time we're asking to do things that are in the kind of wheelhouse of these characters, where it's like, yeah, this is fairly routine stuff. So it is one of the things that I find a bit amusing about some D&D players, like, oh, I want to open the door. Well, roll some dice. And it's like, the reality of that is like, okay, so even in the real world, my critical fail would be what? I stub my toe?
Or just like, I don't open the door,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, like, is that really real and conducive to making a story move forward? I don't think so.
I mean, that's one of the things I appreciate about Star Trek Adventures, actually, is that a lot of time it straight up says, like, look, if this is a, something that your character, if it's a basic action, you don't need to do a check.
Mm-hmm.
If it's something your character is good at, which maybe would need some skill from a layperson, then it's probably going to be difficulty 1 or whatever, and you can roll dice. But if you wanted to, you could be rolling dice all the time on difficulty 0 things to be just generating momentum. It's kind of a cheat, and I don't want you to be doing that. Really, because it just would
not my style.
Grind everything to a halt. But it's generally anytime you guys do anything, it's a difficulty 0 check. But it's like, well, there's no point in rolling the check because you're going to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
No, I totally get what you're saying about, like, a lot of stuff is like, well, why are we rolling for this? But I think, like I say, it's I really like the Star Wars thing. I do need to give it a full re-listen at some point. I just remember, I think it was a case of, like, it's that thing of when you're showing somebody something that you've done or something that you like, and you're gauging to see their response, and it's maybe not as positive as you'd like. And I immediately found myself going, oh, well, yeah, look, sorry, there's, we're explaining the rules now and things like that. And when I was showing it to this person at work and that, which, felt a little bit like, okay, I probably wouldn't edit it quite the same these days as I did as the takeaway from it, but I do still really like it. So this group was Mark from, obviously, the D&D stuff. Mark, who is now a big part Frontier, and our friend Ollie, who I don't know if he's popped up in any of the other things we've done, actually. He's been involved, he's come on for other Q&As and stuff, hasn't he? And that.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've actually had him in any other games. We ought to get him back on. It was a really fun, it was a really fun group. The story basically was like, I wanted to pick up at the end of the original Star Wars Episode 4. So it's kind of like we're following another group of, like, rebels that, like, right as the base at Yavin is being evacuated after the Death Star's been blown up, but they're sent on a dangerous mission to go rescue a designer who can who can help the rebellion get more, like, fighter craft and stuff like this, and something like that. Anyway, so they get sent to this Imperial world that he's been, like, hiding out on. I think, as with a lot of things, it's kind of the way I this storyline is probably where I got into the way I write a lot of stuff now, which is to think of, like, what would be a really cool visual, or, like, what's a scene that would be, like, on screen. It would, like, it's quite vivid to me. I can imagine it straight away. And that's how I kind of write a lot of, like, things now, which is like, how can I get to this point? Like, I've thought of a moment that'd be very cool. How can we get to that? If you know what I mean.
Yes.
Or how can I how can I include that as a setting or something more than anything else, and then sort of build out a story from it. And for that, I was like, I had the idea of, like, oh, well, what if this is like a planet where they kind of mothballed a bunch of, like, the ships from the Clone Wars, like the big sort of Republic cruisers and stuff. They're all kind of in the desert, and I was thinking of that, like, airplane graveyard that's where is it? Is it in, like, Arizona or something? Where you've got all of, like, B-52s and everything in the desert. That's kind of
lines and lines of things out in the
that's middle. What I was thinking of. I thought of that first, and then I was like, oh, okay, how can I make that happen? Sort of thing. And then, funnily enough, like a year later, they brought out it's the first. It's not Jedi Survivor was the second one, wasn't it? It was Jedi. The two games, the ones that are kind of like a little Dark Soulsy, but Star Wars.
Oh, I'm just racking my brain. I know which ones you're talking about, but not being the biggest Star Wars person, they
I
kind
can't
of pass
remember
me by.
the name of the first one. Either way, that starts in like a wrecking yard, and admittedly on a rainy planet, not a desert one, but a wrecking yard where they have lines of these ships and they're like cutting them up and everything. And I was like, well, this is kind of like they ripped me off, like. But I just obviously not, just like convergent thought. But I was like, yeah, do you see? Look, it was a cool idea, So yeah, they get sent to this planet and they rescue this guy and they get away and like the heroes save the day. But like I say, it was kind of there's 6 episodes distilled into one sentence there, but yeah. I'd say a bit more from a production standpoint. This one stands out to me because it was like where I got to do like a voice direction and stuff and get in like a lot more guests and stuff. There were people who just did one voice and that was it.
Yeah, I think that's where generally the production style shifted, and it's much more like that's the turning point of like, and that became the standard in many respects afterwards. And
I just like doing it as a process. I like when we're playing the game session, I do all the voices. I don't necessarily do voices as we know these days. Oftentimes, it's become my unofficial motto, hasn't it? Of like, we'll fix that in post. But like I'll add all the character dialogue and things, and then in post I'll usually make it slightly better. Because my ad-libbing skills. This is the other thing. I feel like I don't know whether this is going to sound super conspiracy theory. I do think I got a touch of long COVID at one point because listening back through older stuff, I'm definitely way more on it sometimes with my ad-libbing, whether it's dialogue or just being quick in responding to stuff, and I feel like I'm not up to that anymore.
I don't know. It's a struggle where like I try to perceive these things, but age as much as anything else, and ongoing world events stressful. Yeah. There's a lot of distractions. I tend to think there's a lot of reasons for folks to be not quite as on point as they might
I definitely
have
been, had a bit after I had COVID the first time where I had a bit of brain fog, which really. These days, even now, like I'll find like I struggle to find the right word sometimes, and it's like, why am I? And it's something basic, and I'm like, why is this a problem? But still, there's no way for me to know that at all. But
who knows? And that's it. That's it, as you say.
Yeah,
could be that. Could be any number of things.
Yeah, just losing. I'm just getting old. I'm losing it.
Just losing the plot slowly but surely. As we all.
But yeah, like you say, this is kind of how we got into that production style of like I'm ad-libbing as we're playing, and then after the fact, I'm snipping out those bits and replacing it with like somebody else doing the same lines and that. And I think it does work. And I've gotten better at like making it sound natural. But this was kind of the start of it. But yeah, interesting. Like from like at the point now where we're making Frontier, like this was obviously Mark, who's on Frontier, is one of the 3 main people in this. This is the first time Amy does a cameo. Because I think at this point I'd started playing Curse of Strahd on Penance. Because this was like June. This started basically exactly a year after we started the podcast. The first episode of this went out. And yeah, I think Amy was part of that Curse of Strahd group. So I was like, hey, would you be up for doing this one voice? Dragon was also on it. She did a voice. She did a voice of a robot. So yeah, you can sort of see it coming together a little bit here of like what will become more of our regular groups and that. Yeah, I don't know. I need to go back and re-listen to it, but I still think it's quite good. And it's, like I say, one of my favourite things. And I made it through 5 of the 6 episodes before actually using copyrighted, pre-written Star Wars music. In the end, it was just one bit right at the end where I was like, well, it needs to go into the classic Star Wars credits music, doesn't it, at the end? And then, so of course, then that was the one episode where on YouTube it's like, no, we're taking some ad revenue from this. I'm like, oh, okay.
Well.
So we went from Star Wars to your first time running anything on the podcast, which was our Shadowrun story.
Indeed. Yes, which I happen to have listened back to not too long ago, which probably is going to help me remember all of this. Not that I haven't already gone on about this on previous podcasts. I feel like it's become a bit of a running thing that even I'm sick of, is me bringing up either, hey, remember the 2 times that I ran things? But yes, no, it was a lot of fun, and it was fun listening back to it. In particular, that it was the smallest group that's ever been run, and I feel like that was just the way that we even planned it. There was never it was always you and Jason were the two players, and I was the GM on that.
Mm.
And I can't remember that there was even an attempt to get a third player on. That some part of me was probably like, yes, two people, that's enough for me to manage right now.
Yeah, but I think it worked. There's nothing wrong with having a smaller group.
That's it. But the overall story went well after we'd gotten over the initial hump of realizing that Shadowrun itself is one of the most nightmarish RPG systems that's ever been created.
That was not even just making characters was a nightmare.
Really was.
Yeah, and I spent ages trying to figure it out and build a character and everything, and then Jason just turned up and went, "I'm playing a pre-gen." I was like, "Why didn't I do that?"
Yep. And then as we were playing, Jason being able to just be like, "Oh, my sheet's got this on it," and I'd be like, "Oh, so it has. Well, I guess you can do that now." Yeah. I was going to make you roll, but since you pointed at that, yeah, cool, go for it. Because I'm not going to force you to roll 20d6 or whatever the hell. I can't even remember half the rules, but it was just an excessive amount of dice. You really needed to have a map in front of you to do things properly, and it's like we're here for the narrative. I'm here to take these guys on a trip to a seedy village out in Cern Abbas that I'd come up with. Which at this point, if we were not that we're likely to ever go back, but I feel like you guys cleaned the town up in your way.
We did,
but things were going to get better by the time you got out. You came in, dealt with the gangsters, knocked the seediest elements out of a very seedy place. And Jason even found love.
He did, yeah. What's crazy to me about it is we got 4 episodes out of one session. That's the only time that's happened.
Yeah. No, I mean, we did. I mean, listening back again recently, it's funny because there are points where we're all just going, "Oh my god, it's so hot." And then towards the latter end of it, you can just feel the energy just draining just a little bit. And there I am just being like, right, I'm going to keep cracking the whip just a little bit. I've got ideas. We're almost there. We're going to get over the hump.
So the first episode of it came out on August 29th, 2018. So we would have been recording at the start of August, probably.
Mm-hmm. It was sweltering. We were sticking to the leather couch. I remember that much.
Yeah. It was... I mean, I'm just thinking about... I don't have much in the way of memories of editing it, but it must have been I must have left a lot in. Or it's just the fact of smaller group, less tangents.
Yes, I don't think there were any real tangents, or what tangents there were in service to what we were doing for the most part. But the few times when we veered off a little bit, it was mostly to discuss the moments that had just occurred or whatever.
Yeah, and
then quickly got back to it. Where sometimes, yes, we realize 20 minutes into a tangent, oh, we've not been playing the game. That's a regular occurrence.
I can think specifically as to the recording we did this last Monday night, where there's a good 25 minutes of that recording where we're just talking about podcast ads. But I'm like, well, that's all coming out. As we were talking, I was just like, this is all coming out. But obviously,
that's nature of the game.
That's not a spoiler because it's not making it into any episode. But I mean, storyline wise, it was an interesting idea there where you kind of you had some sort of curveballs that you threw at us and everything, and I think I do like when you, well, I guess not just you, Jason, as well, when he did it that one time, but I do like when I get to hand the GM reins over and be like, okay, let's see what happens here, because to me it's very much like you guys always come at stories and everything from a different, your own viewpoint, your own way of writing them. So it's just interesting to me to sort of see the contrast in terms of how I personally approach these narratives and stuff and things. And it was interesting, and we've always had fun doing it and that. And yeah.
And from my perspective, that was a pretty much ideal first GMing instance, aside from the system itself being a pain in the ass. But the actual running of the show, I had decent notes, and as has happened in both cases, a good chunk of what was on the recording was on the paper in front of me in some way, shape, or form. And then there's about at least a third to half of what went on that was just, oh, damn, I'm going to have to react to, in that instance, it was Jason flirting with the silent giant troll enforcer lady, where I was like, I had no expectation that anybody was going to flirt with that character.
I think he flirted with me at one point as well, which fully was like, oh, I wasn't expecting us. He implied that we were a couple going into this, and I was like, probably should have discussed that before we started recording. But
that was immediately on the taxi ride into town, where we had it as like I had the taxi driver asking you questions as a kind of introduction to your characters.
Yeah,
and Jason half jokingly was just like, "Oh, we're lovers." Something to that effect, and you just be like, oh, "We are." And obviously, I
roll
feel
with
like
it, but
that played into things of like Jason's character is just a carouser who liked to say things to be provocative.
But no, it just that I think it was your introduction, like you say, to curveballs being thrown at you, which I'd kind of gotten a little bit used to through. At this point, we were like 30 episodes into the podcast, and I'd run games before the podcast and everything, and that. So I was used to having to like expect a little bit of the unexpected coming my way, kind of thing. But yeah, I think, like I say, you weren't expecting Jason to go for Dasher, the bouncer lady, or anything. So
and then later on, it was the part where you'd been talking to the barman for a little while. You'd kind of wound him up a bit because he'd turned out to be a bit of a shady character himself. And then talk turned to like, so what are you guys actually here for? And if memory serves, Jason again kind of pushed your character and was like, oh, he's here for something. And then we got you into the room with the old madam, and I was like, some part of me in that moment was like, I have no plan for this.
Yep.
And given the way that I presented the place, it could have gone into some quite dark territory. But instead I was like, no, let's make it silly. Let's steer in a very different direction from that, and instead treat it as like we're a little way into the future. EastEnders has become a legend.
Well, here's the thing. I think it worked well because you rolled with that really well, and but I think Jason and I were both willing. I think you picked the right two people for that. That we both were just like, okay, we're just doing whatever. We're up for it. We're not going to just sit there quietly and go like, oh, okay, I guess this is happening. We both. Again, I keep going back to. I think we both were making swings. You know what I mean? Like we weren't just letting things lie. It was like, we are adding into stuff, and ultimately the way that things worked out, like. I think part of the reason why the EastEnders thing came up was because we'd already established that your character was on the run from like two trollish dudes, like thugs, and I was like, oh, it's so close to the Mitchell brothers, and then it just tied in my mind of like, this is thematically on point, and it allowed me to not have the mistress do anything untoward or force the situation. Instead, we could have a very slightly, I don't know, I don't want to call it charming, but I need to listen back to it at some point. I do remember it, but I just,
where your character played it off very well of just being like, oh no, I'm here for a bedtime story. I just want to be tucked in.
So, I mean, look, that's what any of us wants in these days.
Well, ain't it just?
Yeah. Okay, so we went from that straight into what would actually at the moment be our last outing with Bork, Prawns and Enade, which was the story arc which I called at the time Rates of Change. Basically, you found yourselves like you were carrying on pursuing this cult. I think maybe I'd had one of them escape from the tomb thing. I think maybe you were just chasing. You might have just been chasing rumors at this point, though. Actually, or maybe it was like one of them got away, and you were like, he's going to be reporting to his bosses or something. So you were sort of pursuing them further down the road rather than returning the relics back to the village. This is notable for my, because I had this. I still do. I have this giant world map for our D&D setting, and I think I just idly threw out you pass a crossroads, to your left is the big city, thinking but I've already told you you're not going right. You're going straight on. And he went, so we turn off to go to the city. And I was like, okay. I do not have anything here planned. But here is the first two episodes of this storyline then. So instead of pursuing the cult, you went into the nearby city and got rooms at the inn. Went to I think there was a whole thing with Bork's cousin, was it? Yeah. Ran a like a general goods store, which I just again pulling it out of nowhere. I was like, I need to come up with a voice with him, so I put on like the strongest lisp I've ever done, sort of thing. I was literally like almost biting my tongue as I was doing it. Prance got a portrait of himself done by.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah.
With his dove Apollonia covering up his modesty.
I think, had you charmed the guy into it? That was it, wasn't it? Again,
yes.
Yeah.
And he snapped out of it pretty much as soon as he'd finished, if memory serves.
Yeah.
And like, what on earth am I doing right now?
Yes.
I only playing the beautiful ladies.
But yeah, Prance and Enna, they had a big fight.
Mm-hmm.
And Prance went out to sleep under the docks, if I remember right. Was that it?
Had a whinge and cry by himself, so to speak.
Yeah.
But things had been brewing for a while. Prance had mispronounced Enethe's name more than enough times at that point.
I think it was a clash of styles, should we say? Yeah. And Enethe and Bork went off on their own. Like, okay, well, I guess we better carry on with this cult. Maybe he'll catch us up. Maybe he won't, or whatever. You came running back to the inn, and they were gone. You got yourself a horse, went out into the darkness trying to catch them up, and immediately stumbled across some bandits instead because you just went to the nearest torch fire, assuming it would be them.
Yes. And very risky behavior in fairness.
Yeah. So you lost your horse, and ended up having to use the relics dimension door to escape and ran off into the darkness. And eventually, I think the following morning, Bork and Enethe came across you on the side of the road looking disheveled, and you're like, "Yeah, I've lost my stuff." Yeah. So you carried on up the road. You found your way to a sort of bend in the road, where you were met by a young woman on a horse who had been told to meet you there, which was very confusing to you guys because you weren't expecting this. Mm-hmm. And she was an apprentice wizard and had basically been told by her master, these three are going to be coming along here. Wait here for them. He was investigating the village that you were heading to. And as the four of you went around sort of over the ridge towards the village, you saw that it was enveloped in some kind of time dome. Because I thought it'd be fun to make it incredibly hard for myself to run something and that. But the general gist of it was okay, there's something going down in the middle of town, which you would get to in a bit when you got in there. But the nearer into the town you go, the slower time is moving. Mm-hmm. So you eventually kind of got in the town. There was no sign of any residents. You fought some mutated creatures that were burrowing under the ground, which I was well, it didn't really make a lot of sense because time wasn't going that differently at that point. But I was I think I'd introduced it. The spell was unstable and was sending weird time waves through different bits of it. So some stuff was I was well, what if this was worms evolved by 10 million years or something for some reason because this spell, whatever. Mm-hmm. I needed something for you guys to fight because it had been a while. That's about as far as my thought process went, I think. So you made your way to the middle of the town and you found more of these cultists who had attacked this wizard who was this the master of this young apprentice. And they were all moving at different rates, and he had another relic which they had accidentally struck with a spell while attacking him, and that was what had set off this time dome thing. Mm-hmm. He was Modai the Chronomancer, I think was the name. Basically, because at this point you were Prance, who was Prince, and I was what if this was Morris Day of the time? And so I was Modai the Chronomancer,
Yes, there was. I don't. I remember you kind of letting me know that there was some plans for this. And obviously, you never know. We might end up back
We
there.
might
But
end up
the
back
idea
there.
that there's a whole council of time wizards and such,
and they're all named after like 80s musicians.
That's it.
Like sometimes the jokes aren't good, but sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, that's a solid reference, considering I'd already, as you said, laid the groundwork by making my guy a vaguely Prince-inspired character.
I mean, at a certain point, it wasn't even vague. You had the Prince like symbol on your hat, and you had Apollonia. Yeah,
ostensibly, I've got a bathrobe somewhere that's probably just in a terrible state of repair at this point.
I forgot you had that. Yeah,
that has a massive custom decal on the front of it of Prince's symbol that he was once known by.
You wore that to Halloween, didn't you?
In it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I put a bunch of androgyny, I think, was meant to be symbol represented, and I just put a bunch of those symbols, the purple bathrobe.
Yeah.
Whether that thing's wearable at this point is probably very debatable, but it's somewhere in the flat.
Yeah. Now here was the moment of contention was that like because the time was going different ways, the apprentice was a little shocked that Enade like just straight up killed all the cultists without like taking any prisoners, and showed it was more that he showed zero remorse. He was like, they made their choices, they did their thing, and so this is a hanging point of plot thread that if we ever go back is going to come back into it, maybe was just like the actions of Enade and like how ruthless he was kind of thing. But yeah, as a result, there wasn't really a combat because he just kind of like took into account the time differential and just like shot them all to death, and then was like, yeah. And I think the reason why it was contentious was like when you caught up with them in the time stream, they were like basically like teenagers, and he had just like mowed them all down and was like, it's fine, whatever. Maybe I'm making more, like as the GM, I'm making more of this than there was, but I vaguely, it was clearly important enough to stick in my head.
And it was, I feel like towards the end of what we were doing, the way Jason was playing NFA was like, he was getting, like the character was getting more irritated.
Yeah.
So he was starting to do things a little bit more rashly, and that was certainly a moment of like, oh, was that the right thing? Like that was a real shoot and ask questions later kind of a move.
Yeah. So who knows? Maybe we'll get back to if we ever get back to these characters. I would love to pick it up at this point, because basically you made it to the center of town and managed to shut down the relic, so the time dome dropped. The wizard in the center. Well, the first thing when the time dome dropped, suddenly it was snowing. Implying that quite a bit of time has passed, actually, because it was summer when you got to the outside of the time dome. So we'll approach that when and if we get to it. You will note as well, actually, that we'll get to the if we got time. The most recent, it was also snowing in the most recent D&D thing that we did. So it's almost like maybe I've been fitting in all of our other stories around them in being in that gap in between when you went into the time dome and when the time dome came down, but with an idea of like maybe we'll get back to it in my grand Marvel Cinematic Universe plan of.
But I was paying attention. If they trace the events and put it all on the calendar, they might find it vaguely accurate.
Yeah, I mean, not really joking about that. That is kind of bit like when I've been deciding where these stories are happening, that's been in my head of like, well, this is all happening in between, while they're in the time dome kind of thing, But the last thing that happened was this chronomancer was dying, and he saw you. Up to this point, Prance didn't have any idea. Like he was like amnesiac, sort of like no idea of like how he got to the town where he was before he met Enade and Bork, and like didn't have any idea where he'd come from. And this guy was like, "I knew I'd see you again, Master." And then he died, but he was an old man, like so. And it was kind of like a what the hell point, and then then we never went back to it. Maybe we will, but that was that was I wanted to have a cliffhanger ending on that was like it was not only an event cliffhanger, it was a character-based cliffhanger as well, and that and everything, and questions of Pronce's provenance, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, again, I kind of like that as like a sort of arc 3, season 3, whatever you want to call it, of what I thought was, it was going to be our kind of ongoing, like, this is our main D&D group, and like with the idea of like, well, maybe we do some side stuff and things, but like we're going to continue with these characters, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I quite like that as like a sort of, again, we managed to stick to the 6 episode kind of short thing again. Yeah.
Keep it concise.
Yeah, I don't know, I quite like it. Plus I got to play around with some time stuff and things, which is fun.
Yeah, and it ultimately, like, not that it was the exact plan in the moment beyond, like, giving us, like, a stopping point, but, like, it served a good purpose at this point where it's like, well, it's been a long time, but plot point justifies any amount of time between now and, like then and now, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I think what it was, we knew at this point Jason was going to have to take a break.
Yes. Yeah, he had a lot going on.
Yeah, so we kind of, I don't want to say built that in, but I had an idea of like, okay, we'll sort of, here's an idea, I can move the timeline on. I think I might have even been thinking, and I can have some stuff been happening while this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing concrete at that point, but like, yeah. But yeah, then we went from that into Call of Cthulhu.
Indeed.
A change of pace.
Yeah, quite. And I've got kind of fond memories of that because it felt like, obviously, the focus on the mental health things that tested them. And in my case, in particular, I'd come up with a character who was already a bit on the edge.
Yeah. Also, I want to say as well, like, this is the first coming together of, 3 of the 4 members of our Frontier crew as well, really, wasn't it?
Yes. Yep.
Interesting to look back on. I think in terms of story inspiration on this, I straight up was like, well, I don't know how long we'll get. Well, it ended up being quite a long storyline, didn't it? It was like 12 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think at the time I was still thinking it was going to be like 6. And I was just like, well, I would just do like not like a monster of the week story, but kind of a monster, like it's one monster and you're just investigating it. And I think at this point I was rewatching X-Files. Mm-hmm. So I fully kind of ripped off the whole, that dude from the first season who has 2 episodes, Eugene Victor Toombs, who's the guy who can like stretch himself through like...
Oh, yeah. From the episode Stretch.
Yeah. But mainly the bit where he needs to eat people's livers. So that I kind of took that and like slapped it on like a giant like flesh monster thing kind of thing. But yeah, this is also this is the first introduction of our like, I want to say our second kind of main setting, really, because the first obviously is our D&D world. This next, this is the first time we made it to Twynham-on-Sea, which is our kind of like alternate version of a seaside British town, which is like it's just a mirror to like the town I live in, basically.
Effectively,
yeah. It used to back in the day, it used to be called Twynham. And then they renamed it to Christchurch at some point, probably like 1,000 years ago, I think it is. Well, whenever they built the Priory, which is, I think, 1086, they changed it to Christchurch.
Okay.
So yeah, I pulled Twynham-on-Sea to the point where like the local school is still called Twynham and stuff and things, and yeah. But that was my inspiration for that. I was like, I want to make a version of this town that we can use for like various games that are like in more of a real world rather than like a fantasy or sci-fi setting. But obviously, firstly for Cthulhu, but then we came back to it later with things from the Flood, and then well, I guess Fallout as well, really, didn't we? But sort of the Fallout. Yeah, I mean, again, there's not a lot to say about the storyline, really, is there? It's just like I had an idea of like the local kind of lady of the manor kind of thing had was like a secret cultist or something for dark powers, and her husband had died in previous war or something, and their son had been born this kind of mutant creature sort of thing, and it was all being covered up by the town's doctor, who ran like a sanatorium and things and everything, and I bet he was using the sanatorium to like procure livers for this, the creature, essentially, the creature being the sun sort of thing, and but yeah, the sun had started breaking out and killing people as well, and that was how you found out about it. And so we had like a priest get killed, and like Mark's characters, like there was somebody at the whatchamacallit, like at the theater have been killed and stuff, and I don't know, it just was, I think I got to put in a lot of interesting elements that I think weren't necessarily like story, like at least on paper was just like, oh no, that's just a thing, like the putting in the thing about like Shakespeare's Tempest and that. I just put that in there as like a kind of like, well, this is a play that's happening, and then it managed to end up playing into kind of mirroring a lot of the events with the creature and stuff like this and stuff. And I don't know, I think it's one of the things that whenever we change gears like drastically between games, it really does help as a refresh for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's a full like, oh, okay, we're trying something different. Okay, and it's oftentimes it can throw me into like a slightly sort of different kind of creative gear, and it often works out. It's just partly why I like doing the show, really, because like while we've been doing a lot of Star Trek, we've been able to try different things and jump around and stuff, and I think they've all kind of why they've by and large all kind of worked is because we've sort of been switching it up and getting a sort of fresh feeling every once in a while, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it helps where there's different themes and things that can come up, so I think that helps. With it's sort of like training, so to speak, like you become more aware of the extra pieces you might have in front of you for any given scenario. And again, like I said, I mean, this is at this point, like obviously Mark had been in Star Wars and you'd been in most everything else, but this was the first time Amy was a player, so again it was kind of like we've been able to play around with like who's playing in different games and getting a different vibe every time as well, which I think has been fun. I don't know if there's anything else I want to really add about the story here other than like, I mean, because it is pretty much just like you guys are in town all for your own reasons and get kind of drawn together because you all sort of meet on the way out of the train, really. I mean, my main memory of the way it all went, or the bits that were most memorable to me, was like the fact that we ended up literally in the bushes, that our characters went and ran through the bushes for one of the episodes, and was just like, well, we need to be out of sight, and it was like, we've literally done the aiming for the bushes thing. Damn. That, and the fact that like things didn't go super smooth at the end, and then my character did end up like ostensibly it broke him, that like in true Call of Cthulhu fashion, like my guy had a full mental break, and the conclusion was like, he's a gibbering wreck, like the man is no more.
I mean, that can happen. That's the thing. I mean, and I don't think that was necessarily a bad ending. I think it was like narrative-wise, it kind of worked. It was like, well, while you did deal with the monster, you didn't come out of it unscathed, and that's more interesting to me than like, and all the heroes saved the day.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I'm with you. Yeah,
but really, other than like the sort of, there was a bit of back and forth and investigating. It pretty much was a fairly straightforward story. I mean, this sounds like I'm downplaying it, really, because I think it is a good story, and I think it did work out really well. But you sort of plot it out. It's just like you guys come to town. Some stuff is going on that you get kind of drawn into. You just encounter with the creature. You do some more investigating to find out what it is, because the local people, cops and that don't seem to have much of a handle on it. And through your investigating, you actually stumble across what's going on, but then you have to fight for your lives against this creature that's deadly, and also that there's a kind of a sort of conspiracy plot around it that you've unraveled a little bit, and then it kind of ends tragically, but also successfully. It's I don't know the vaguest possible terms, but I mean that's
I feel like it was entirely reasonable to lose your mind witnessing the eldritch horror at the end.
Yeah. The other thing I want to sort of kind of touch on here is like, we won't go into it, but this was around about the time I started doing bonus episodes as well. lot of world building ones. I had an interview, like there's a series of interviews as well. I did like we started with Lexa from Dead Horse podcast. I mean, we haven't spoken to her for years, have we? But
been a minute.
Yeah, I spoke to Nikolai, who now we just hang out with all the time. So I don't think we were hanging out all the time anyway at that point. But I was just like, "Hey man, do you want to do an interview?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure." Yeah, and we done, we started doing Q&As and stuff like that. And I mean, technically, this is falling under the bonus episode heading, but yeah, this is about where we started doing it in terms of like the timeline of the show. We rolled on from there, just to keep it moving, into like the first of like the sort of little side stories from back in the D&D setting. It was only 3 episodes, but it was like I wanted to do like a pirate adventure, and like looking at the dates of these, it's still 2019, so it's not like this wasn't like a sort of this wasn't one of like the COVID one shots, but it's very much kind of preempting that as like a kind of thing that happened. Really, it was just like 1 session or 2 sessions, and it was like a 3 episode little thing. But it was my first kind of like I want to set something during the time that you're in the time bubble kind of thing, and like not related to anything at all. But yeah, we met completely new characters. It was it was Lexa. Amy came back as a tiefling bard, and Matt, who was also in the Penance RPG Curse of Penance series. In fact, actually, myself, Lexa, Amy, and Matt were the 4 people in that. Well, plus Bellry as well. So it was the crew from that minus Nikolai and minus Bellry. So yeah, I think that was a fun one. They carried along with. I'm rereading the description here as well. Sentenced to serve hard time in the most secure prison in Valana, the human wizard Marie, the tiefling bard Roxy, and the dragonborn barbarian Obadiah find themselves carried along with the escape of notorious pirate captain Pete Smiles, and into his quest to find a legendary magical weapon. Now, if I remember right, Pete Smiles was a joke from something, and I can't remember where it came from.
I feel like that's something Mark said.
Yeah.
It was a joke on like, oh, he's a friendly pirate. Oh, Pete Smiles.
Yeah.
Something like that was the thought process.
Yeah, and like earlier on it was said as a joke, and I wrote it down as a name to use, and this came up and I was like, yeah, I'm just going to use it. Oh, God, I wish I could remember that.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you anything more specific than that. I just vaguely remember that it came out of Mark's mouth is what my gut is telling me.
Yeah. But yeah, just a fun 3 episode little like my like let's do Pirates of the Caribbean kind of story. I can't really remember much to add to that really, other than like I had this idea of a prison on like a sort of rocky outcropping in the middle of the sea. That was it really. I was like, oh, yeah, they're all sentenced to that.
It was good visual, like in the mind's eye at least. Like the prison itself was, yeah. I could easily picture what was described and whatever.
Going back to what I said before about the Star Wars, I mean, I think I almost thought of that before I thought of what the quest was going to be. Like, so I've come up with that and gone like, right, okay, how can I use that in the thing? We went into into Things from the Flood, which I thought was very fun. We were back in Twine on Sea again, but like 60 years later. Went from 1934 to 1994. Whether this is like... this is the thing that we haven't really decided on with this setting. Is like, is it the same timeline each time? Or is it just like, here's that setting, but now it's 1994 and this is like... we're looking into this mirror of this, setting.
Oh yeah, I tend to think it's on the same timeline, but it could be alternative parallel universes at the same time. Like the Shadowrun one requires a certain, like the event where the Shadowrun events take place and magical and technological clash in an instant and become one world. And it's like, well, that doesn't necessarily happen. So that's one version of this location.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, the Things from the Flood kind of thing, I mean, that involves like the reactor being built nearby and accelerator loop and things and stuff, and like, and then at the end of it, I mean, spoilers. We've been saying it, like the town is kind of a little bit like cordoned off and that and everything. which doesn't necessarily track with it being the same town when we, go there for Fallout. Yeah, I mean, again, it just was a chance to like take that setting and like update it to the 90s, and like, I don't think in terms of like story inspiration, I really can kind of pinpoint where I came from this. The general story of this one was like the teenager, like the town is being taken over by like these like nano kind of life form robot things that like sort of take over people's bodies, if I remember right. They're not like body snatching them, but they are like a networked kind of. It's kind of like it's a little bit Invasion of the Body Snatchers, except they're not copying them. They're just kind of like taking over them and being like, "No, we live here now," And I think it was kind of that, and like I had a mental image of like black goo like dripping out of people's eyes and stuff that I think may have just been like I saw like a random like weird image online or something, like a render or something. I was like, oh, that's fucked up, and like thought that would be like a cool image, so I kind of included that. But again, I can't specifically point to like with Cthulhu. I can point to that and go like, well, that's just like specifically like I took the idea from that X-Files thing. I can't point to a specific thing with this one. But yeah, that's kind of the plot, is like these things are taking over, and like the teens stumble across it and find out that like the military's also stumbling across it, but are planning to like cleanse the town or whatever and things.
That was an interesting one where like I felt like, unlike most of the other systems that we've looked at and played, the scenario there meant that our characters were struggling to like, I don't want to say struggling to be effective, but in the way where like we were teenagers dealing with a very adult world and like trying to think of ways to like garner information without immediately kind of putting ourselves in danger, and ultimately we did put ourselves in danger. It was an interesting challenge.
Yeah. We also had it was a slightly awkward kind of thing where Lexa had to drop out like 3/4 of the way through, or maybe further in than that. So narratively had to kind of, I mean, thankfully there actually was like a moment like, well, I was able to immediately parlay that into like, we ended like the last episode with her with like hearing a gunshot and her like gasping, and I was, and then in between those recordings, she had to be like, "Oh, sorry guys, I'm gonna have to drop out," and I was able to just be like, "Well, I guess I'll just nudge that bullet a little bit then," which was I don't know, that was maybe harsh for me to just be like, "Well, we kill her character off," really. But then it sort of was like, it was one of the things where I was like, I felt like we were heading towards a conclusion of the story, and I didn't feel like it was going to be maybe a story that we would necessarily come back to. Like, it wasn't going to be a rolling like, we're definitely, we'd see what these three characters are up to next time. It was, this was kind of fairly contained sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, it raised the stakes and gave a sense of like, things can go very wrong, and they did. Like,
yeah, which I don't know if is necessarily in the kind of I don't know, in the sort of style of the game, really. But also the game does, if I remember right, it does have kind of things of like, hey, look, stuff can go wrong and people can die.
Yeah,
but we didn't really, we didn't really roll it out
as an encapsulated thing. I think it served the drama to have, like, much as it was kind of a mechanical thing of what was going on in the background, like, it served the drama to have that happen. And I didn't read it. Hopefully, the player didn't read it as like a slap because, oh, you're going, well, we'll kill your character then.
It 100% wasn't meant to be that at all. It
wasn't. That wasn't the tone of it at all.
Like. No, it definitely wasn't that at all. It was like, we had a great time playing with Lexa, but she just not, it was, I can't remember exactly. I'm not going to. It was personal reasons, whatever. She left and that and everything. But it just, it was a case of like, okay, well, we do still need to finish the story. Narratively, how can we kind of have this moment have the most impact, while also having it make sense that Lexa's not in the game anymore? And I mean, it was a sort of quite, I mean, I don't want to say convenient, but we'd already heard a gunshot kind of thing, I think that may be the only time I've killed a player character in the podcast, actually. Unless you count the ending of the Alien one shot, where kind of killed everybody, but like, well, not again, even not really. I always said on screen then, but in the moment. And obviously, we've had a lot of people die in Frontier, and we've had a lot of people die in general, but like none of them player characters.
Yeah.
Which I think, if anything, actually kind of made it have more impact, because at this point we're 66 episodes into the podcast since the first time player characters died. Which I think for TTRPG podcast that's quite high, maybe. I mean, especially I can't help but think of like
the modus operandi of the podcast.
Yeah,
if you want to compare that to say Penance and Plummet, I feel like we're doing all right.
That was a comparison I was going to make. Yeah, like Belring got through like 3 characters in an episode once, I think, or something.
Exactly. Like which one of those things where it's like I'm not. I've got concepts. I like to sort of see them through. If I was tasked with something like that, oh my god, no! I don't feel like we kill characters quickly or like regularly at all.
No, and I mean, and obviously this isn't to like, not to. We're not knocking other podcasts at all in the way they do things. It's
style change,
different styles. That's all. Yeah. Yeah. Again, I liked the system of things from the Flood. I think that's another one that I wouldn't mind playing again at some point. I don't know if we'd do it on the podcast. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
In what context we would end up playing it, I don't know. Who knows? We went from there into the kind of prelude to Frontier. We had a one-shot. We're now directly into April 15th, 2020, which is slap banging first lockdown.
Damn, yeah.
Yeah, because like Things from the Flood ended basically as COVID started.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did. It was you, me, and Amy. We just did a Star Trek Adventures one shot, but you were playing Johnny and Amy was playing Murphy. And
Indeed.
I can't really remember what happened in it, other than you crashed on a planet and
crashed on the planet. We got we went out to scout the area around us. A bunch of native life descended upon us and kind of chased us for a brief moment, if memory serves. We got things up and running with native life chucking stuff at us and beating their chests.
And then you got beamed up, I think. It was kind of, yeah.
That's my vague recollection of the plot line there.
I mean, it really was it's like one episode.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's it wasn't like super earth shattering, but I think it really was a case of like, we're on lockdown, I want to play some Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. And then that obviously then led to, we had a good time. We were like, yeah, maybe we'll do a longer series of this. And, so we did. I mean, I haven't really got anything to add to that other than like, it's a fun introduction to those characters, I think. And like set like, I don't want to bring up my spreadsheet now, but it's like 6 months before the events of Frontier happen, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't the plan at the time, but it did become an inadvertent pilot of sorts. And yeah, it's the moment of conception for Murphy and Johnny, and I think that for the part, I'd have to listen back. I don't think we've added that much to those characters. They came fairly complete, so to speak.
Yeah, there wasn't any kind of like, oh, I just want to retcon Johnny into like not being like this or whatever. It was, yeah, they came pretty much complete. Other, even to the point where like Murphy is lieutenant in this instead of lieutenant commander, but like she got promoted in the first episode of Frontier. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to change that in between. I think the only real major change was we just tweaked the name of the starship. Because originally, I think in that one it had the full name of USS Tenzing Norgay, and then I think just for like, because I realized we'd be saying it a lot, and like just for expedience sake, we changed it just to USS Tenzing.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that I think was really the only change. Yeah, I am not really got anything to add to that other than like you say, it's a neat little pilot for Frontier. Next, we had the second of my like little D&D kind of excursions, which was I don't think this one really worked. It was like a mountain climbing adventure. But I had an idea in my head. It was like there's a young explorer that wanted to make his name and join the Explorers Guild by climbing like the highest summit in the mountains that hadn't been climbed before, and like enlist some help from Wandering Adventure Ruby, who was Dragonplay them, and Amy reprised her role as Meg from Curse of Penance. That was more just like, I think that was kind of thing where I was like, you know, she was like, oh, it'd be fun to play Meg again. I was like, well, I can come up with a thing. I don't think as a story it really worked. Because it wasn't, there wasn't really any twist. It was just like, they go to the mountain. Like, oh no, he turns up and convinces them to help him. They go to the mountain. I think they had a short combat, but like they managed to get round my other encounter that I had planned. They climbed the mountain. There was a dragon slayer on the top of the mountain who may or may not have been an actual dragon in disguise. But really, then they were like, okay, well, we did it. Let's go. So it wasn't, yeah. I think it's fine. Like it, you know, we have some fun character stuff in it, which is good. Yeah. But I don't think it really, like, of the D&D things we've done, it's the one that I think just kind of falls flat. It's just my personal opinion. I think, you know, we had fun playing that and everything, but I think in the final things, it just kind of falls flat. I haven't really got anything to add to that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Can't hit it out of the park every time, I guess.
No, I think what it was, I was reading like, I was reading some mountaineering books at the time, and I was like, oh, you know, maybe we could, you know, do a D&D thing, and then it just didn't work. Not everything works. So moving swiftly on. More D&D after that, actually. Looking at this, it was it ended up only being 6 episodes. I was kind of starting up a sort of second, what I thought was going to be like a longer thing with the Halls of Zenden. It was Liam and Shams and Katie, who I work with, who all played D&D before and everything. We were playing as Erebus and Celeste and Fane, and they were like investigating a strange thing that had been unearthed in a mountain, and it was going to be like an ancient sorcerer from like the previous age of the world. It was like his hidden fortress kind of thing was like within the mountain and everything, and like he'd sort of put himself into state. Like, we didn't get to this part. Like, he was going to put himself into stasis, and they were going to like accidentally wake him up, and he was going to then become like a kind of force to be reckoned with in the world again. Unfortunately, we got 6 episodes recorded, and then lockdown happened again, and you know, we were recording in my house, so this wasn't an online group, and then we couldn't do that anymore, and then we just never came back to it, because I think, if I remember, Katie moved away or something. You know, these things you can't predict and that and everything, and it just yeah, we kind of ended on a cliffhanger with them. Yeah, in a library in the hall. So as far as we know, they're still down there. The characters are anyway.
What it is. What could you do at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still, you know, Liam and Shams I still see regularly and that and everything. So I guess we could pick this up at some point and just have it. You know, Katie's characters mysteriously disappeared and they find themselves like, you know. But actually, that feels a bit like, you know, a bit ham-handed. Ham-handed.
Ham-fisted. Either way.
Yeah. It's a shame, really, again, because I had ideas for that, you know, storyline, and it just kind of fell flat. But hey, what are you going to do? It's a pandemic.
That's it.
Yeah. If it feels like I'm speeding up, it's because I realised we're actually an hour and 53 on the recording right now.
Oh, damn. Yes. We don't want to keep everybody here just listening to us wearing on, but...
Yeah. So really, the next thing that happens is Frontier. A couple of little bits in between. Yeah, there's a lot of bonus episodes in a row here. I think while we were starting to record Frontier and getting things ready, it goes from like episode 77 is the last episode of that, you know, D&D thing. Then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 bonus episodes of various types, like interviews and world building, everything, before we have our session 0 episode for Frontier. And yeah, Frontier starts. I think actually I do have a spreadsheet for like download stats that I keep, probably unnecessarily, and I've got that area marked on it as COVID bonus zone purgatory, because everything had been cut off by lockdowns and everything, and we were starting to record Frontier, but like I didn't have anything ready to go, and it was just like bonus episode after bonus episode after bonus episode, and it's a major drop off in downloads. I mean, over the years they've all like ticked up as people have been listening through and everything, but at the time I remember it just being like, oh god, all of our momentum's gone, and we're not actually releasing any new content. We're just kind of coming up with stuff, world building and things, and it just what can you do?
Well, that's it. I think that everybody felt that way at the time. It was. I mean, I'm not going to go into the details, but yeah, my life became a bit of an absolute nightmare around lockdown. So yeah, it was a trying time for us all.
Yeah. But then we started Frontier, and I mean, we've talked about Frontier quite a lot, but I think it just to skim through it, really. I mean, because it's a kind of ongoing thing. Maybe we don't. Maybe this is the one thing we don't spoil on here.
Yeah, this is the one where we should say go back to the start of
Go back to Frontier.
Those of us that have survived this long into the recording, if you're not already on board with us on this current run, now is the time to go back.
Yeah.
Or if you jumped in halfway, go back and fill in the gaps.
Yeah, go back to episode 78. Frontier kicked off with episode 78, Homecoming. If you really feel like pushing the boat out, go to the episode before it, which is the session 0 where we all introduce our characters. But yeah, I mean, Frontier Season 1 we've talked about a fair amount, I think, the last couple of years and everything. And it was a lot of fun. We got to, in a non-spoilery way, for the first time in this episode, the USS Tenzing is tasked with leading an expedition into the mysterious Bermuda cluster, which is a star cluster that has been cut off from the rest of the galaxy for the last 600 years, but has mysteriously, the subspace storms that surround it have started to cool off. So Starfleet thinks they can get an expedition in through one particular region. So the ship has been tasked to go lead that expedition. And we spent all of Season 1 getting to the point where the expedition's getting marshaled at Deep Space 3 to go actually set off. Go check it out. There's some adventures happen along the way. In between Season 1 and Season 2, we did do what at the time we called Pilot Season, which was meant to be literally, I think, 3 months, wasn't it, originally?
It went on quite a bit longer than that.
Yeah, look, that was not a great time. Like, that was meant to be like, okay, we're taking a short break at the end of Season 1. We're going to play a couple of games for a few bits while we kind of get stuff ready for Season 2, and then we go straight into it. I had a lot of personal family stuff happening at that time, which just completely derailed a lot of stuff in my life and everything. And what was meant to be 6 months went from... It was meant to be like 3 months went from... I think it was maybe 3 months we were going to be playing like 6 different games, weren't we? Something like that. And instead, I put out a D&D thing that I'd recorded the previous summer. We played Alien RPG, which was 2 episodes long. Then we did a one-shot of Warhammer, which was the first thing I'd recorded in months, but which was a lot of fun. And then we played... What did we play then? We played Stargate. Then we had your Fallout RPG one-shot. And then I was... By that point, it had been a year. I'm just looking at the dates on here. So we had Fallout. I don't know if you want to say anything about that at this point. I mean...
I'm willing to put it out there because I've now got the confirmation... Well, we need the confirmation of one last player, although it could probably go ahead without them if that's what it comes to, but I don't think it will. But there's plans brewing right now for Fallout to return after quite a long time. And yeah, I've got some ideas of what we're going to do, but I need to get just a little bit more information before I can start putting pen to paper and getting the plans cemented. But yeah, if you like the last one, then that's something to look forward to, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say at this point, like, we're into the bits of the show that are within the last year or two, so we don't need to really maybe recap it so much.
The long and short of it was that Fallout was set in 21C again, this alternative version of it once again. I mean, ostensibly it would have to be an alternative version for that one parallel universe because we're in the past to some extent, or the events of the past were very different to what had gone on otherwise in the other versions of reality. But But yeah, that's one where I would point people back to it. It's only a few episodes. You can listen to that rather than counting details. But yeah, as mentioned, there's potentially something to follow up coming for that one. So maybe more reason to go back to that if you've not already listened.
Yeah. And the only other thing I think that happened before season 2 of Frontier, which is our current thing that we're doing, so I'm definitely not. I think I'm definitely not going to spoil season 2 of Frontier because we're it's still ongoing. People should listen to it. Is we did our another D&D sort of story, didn't we, with Lupine and Cassie, which was fun.
Indeed.
Yeah. Again, I don't really know what the inspiration was behind that, other than like I think I had like probably some set piecey things in my head of like something going on in a theater.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, like it just like it happened as it happened, and like if you think it was one of those things that like, if you think about it, the bad guys' plots didn't really make any sense at all. But it doesn't matter, does it? You know?
Yeah. If everybody had fun and there was a process of events, it's one of the things. Maybe I don't know if you caught this. This is a little bit of a tangent, listeners. Have you caught any of the trope RPG stuff that I've posted, where it's Mark Bernardo's, or I can never remember what his bloody surname is, dude from Auntie Donna with the beard, the most chaotic of the bunch.
Yeah.
And it's him and a bunch of other Aussie comedians doing role playing. Have you watched any of that?
I haven't managed to see any of that. No.
Because if you think that what we've done at times makes no sense and is chaotic, oh no, we are logical and there's a process. Just wait. I'll be curious if you do listen to some of them, because I think in the last one I was watching, Mark's character, who was a 4-year-old boy who at some point got disintegrated and then reconstituted into sentient dust.
I mean, that's a Bellry character, if there ever was one.
Oh yeah, but it was very much like I watched that with a feeling of like, oh no, we're down the line. We make sense. Not that that's unwatchable. I enjoy it quite a lot, but
yeah.
It's just that juxtaposition of, I think there's a lot of groups out there with a lot more chaos going on.
For sure. Oh no, my point was less like groups with chaos. It was that the bad guys' plot didn't make a lot of sense. So.
Oh yeah, but in that respect, the chaotic aspect of the storytelling. Again, like if you listeners, trope RPG worth a look, because watching that DM deal with what comes at him is a fascination and an inspiration.
I think we're kind of there, aren't we? Like that's pretty much everything.
Yeah,
like
that's up to date.
Not wanting to spoil Frontier, I think, has let us skip over probably 35 episodes of the podcast in this recap. But more than that, probably. But yeah, I think it's crazy that to wrap up. Then I think it's crazy that it's been 8 years. We've done quite a lot of different things, and I think a lot of them I'm not against like going back and revisiting. Like,
no, there's not really anything where I don't think there would be some interesting angle to pick up on.
Yeah, I mean, even going so far, I know we did it recently before this, but even like I like going back to the D&D setting. It would be great if at some point, as we said, it'd be great if we could get Mark and Jason back on board. Who knows? I mean, we haven't fallen out with them at all. You know, Mark and we made a film, didn't we? Like very recently. Like and Jason's still, we're still talking to Jason and stuff, and it's not like it's not impossible. It's just one of those things where it's like Mark doesn't live in the area anymore, and Jason's very busy, and we've obviously been doing other things and stuff. So who knows? I think if we put a serious talk into getting it done, we could get it done. Even if it's just like a one-off kind of yeah. But yeah, who knows? Who knows what the future holds?
Same.
Only that Frontier Season 2 will continue very soon.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And I've got vague plans. Fallout should return. I'm not going to say should is going to be the operative word for now, but that will hopefully soon turn into.
Well, here's the call to action to listeners then. Let's get some interaction happening. Let us know. I don't know, put a social media post or anywhere. I mean, no, Discord would be great. If you're a Discord user, you can go to pretendingwithdice.com. There's a direct link to our Discord server on there. Jump on board. Tell us tell us we sent you. And but we just, but yeah, I mean, social media, whatever. We want to know what your favorite thing that we've done is. What was your, some of your favorite moments, some of your favorite characters, because some of them are like, they can be player characters or NPCs or whatever, because some of them NPCs I've really loved, and they popped up once and we never saw them again, but they were a really fun thing to, really fun moments or whatever. We want to hear what your favorite moments are. We've been here for 8 years. We're still going strong. Here's to another 8. if I live that long. Probably shouldn't say stuff like that.
Too fatalistic about it.
Yeah. If the internet's still around in 8 years.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. But yeah, no, we want to hear from you on this. It's we still love doing the show, and like, it's a fun time, so we're going to keep doing it, I think. Yeah,
indeed. Well, we shall wait and see who comes back to us, if anybody. I won't be surprised if it's quiet, but we can live with it if it is.
Let's call people out by name. Steve Boost, I want to know what your favorite moment of the show was. I know you're listening.
Yeah, we've got a handful of folks that we could probably rely on like that. Taishal, Joanna?
Klepto, what was your favorite moment of the show? Besides the one you were in. I didn't even mention that. We did. Yeah, we didn't mention the D&D list. That was part of the pilot season bit, wasn't it? The one D&D thing I'd recorded the previous summer was with listeners. It was with Klepto and Jeff and Sharona, and we had a fun time.
Oh yeah, that was a really fun episode.
Yeah,
or couple of episodes.
Again, neatly fitting in around about the sort of in-universe winter time, so the time bubble's still up. So it all hangs together.
There's internal consistency, damn it.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think we've pretty much covered everything pretty extensively, really, haven't we?
Yep. Hopefully, this has been a curious little glimpse back over it. I feel like we've done a couple of these now over the years.
Yeah,
and it's interesting in part for me being like, oh my god, my memory of some of this completely disappeared. It's not there anymore. Yeah. And for other parts, it's there going strong. Yeah. So hopefully we've got similar places in our listeners' minds.
I mean, I think we spent a bit more time talking about the earlier days than we did about more recent stuff. But again, I feel like in the last couple of sort of bonus things and Q&A things, we've talked more about the more recent stuff anyway. And especially with Frontier still being ongoing, I feel like at some point we ought to do like a big Frontier specific kind of Q&A thing. We kind of did at the start of season 2, we kind of did a look back at season 1, didn't we? So I mean, that's like the stuff's out there already for the more recent stuff. So I don't really know how to end this. It's been that long since we've recorded anything where I've had to. Yeah.
Is there any social media to throw out there? At this point, I'm not. You won't find me many places. I'm on Bluesky.
There is. We're also on Bluesky, which is linked on. Everything is linked on pretendingwithdice.com. But everywhere you can pretty much just, as always, just search "pretend with dice," which is a holdover from when there was like limits on usernames. So on pretty much everything, we are pretend with dice. We do still have a Twitter X account, but like I don't really post on there that much because it's a Nazi hellhole. But if you are turning a blind eye to the nastiness of meta, we are on Instagram and Facebook. we're on Bluesky and whatever. I mostly if you message us, we will get it. So but go to pretendingwithdice.com. The Discord server is probably I would say the least toxic place to find us.
Nobody gets to come in and act like an asshole in there. So it's good times.
Yeah. Spam bots get banned. Yeah,
exactly. And the people trying to sell us avatars get identified very rapidly.
Yeah.
Naming no names, person currently lurking in the server who's not said anything yet.
Yeah, I've been keeping an eye on them. Naming their names. They're playing the long game on this one. It's been a couple of weeks.
But they're waiting until we've forgotten when they joined and who they might be, is what I'm thinking.
But anyway, come join us on there. And don't be a spam bot. Be a friend.
Indeed.
There we go. That's words to live by. Don't be a spam bot. Be a friend. As I prepare to edit this down and spam the link to a bunch of places.
It's with intent. There's a human being behind the whole thing.
There is, even if I'm copy-pasting it.
That is not the case.
Anyway, this has been fun. As I said at the beginning, we will be back very soon with Frontier. I don't have a date for you yet on that, but we are we're focused on kind of recording this batch of episodes, and some real life stuff has affected recordings, but not to the point where we've stopped. We are still recording. We're getting the next batch prepped for release. Just watch this space. As always, the Discord server is probably the best place to get news before anywhere else, even if it's just by minutes. But it would be more in depth on Discord. I will say, I will be. And you can ask me questions back and stuff on that. But and watch our social media handles, watch our Discord server for news, and we'll be back very soon with Frontier. I think, at the very least, I think before the summer is out, we will be back with more Frontier, which I admit sounds like it could be anything up to like September, but I feel like it'd be before that. Anyway, keeping it vague, we will end it there, I think. Thanks so much, everybody, and we'll see you later.
Bye.